My wedding day was supposed to be perfect, yet it shattered in a single, humiliating moment. As guests raised their glasses, my younger sister Sophia brushed past the towering $3,000 cake and whispered, "Oops," while the masterpiece collapsed in ruins. My mother excused her with a smile. "You know how she gets." I swallowed my fury, pretending nothing was wrong. But that night, I quietly canceled the apartment lease I had co-signed for her. At 9:42 the next morning, the real shock arrived. An official notice that revealed just how far my own family's betrayal truly reached. The ballroom glimmered with golden light, crystal chandeliers scattering reflections across marble floors, polished so carefully I could see my own anxious face in them. My wedding dress hugged me like armor, lace and satin whispering promises of a perfect future. For one fleeting moment, I believed this day might finally belong to me. A day untainted by family politics, by the endless comparisons to my younger sister. I wanted to believe that, at least for today, I would not be the afterthought. Then Sophia walked in. She was draped in a white gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, not quite a wedding dress, but close enough to blur the lines. The murmurs began instantly, an audible ripple of confusion and intrigue. Guests turned their heads, whispering as though they weren't in plain sight. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with curiosity, but all eyes landed on her. My pulse tightened. I caught my mother's eye, silently pleading for intervention, but she only smiled indulgently, brushing a strand of silver hair from her cheek. "Don't fuss, Clara," she murmured when she passed by me, patting my arm as if I were a nervous child. "She just wants to look beautiful in the photos. You know how she is." Of course I knew how she was. Sophia had always been the star in every room, the darling who could do no wrong. If she wanted my spotlight, she took it. If she wanted my toys, my room, my freedom, it was handed to her without question. And now, on the day meant to celebrate my own life, she gleamed under the same light I had prayed would finally illuminate me. Daniel squeezed my hand. His touch was steady, reassuring, but his brows furrowed. He noticed the whispers too, though he said nothing. The string quartet played louder, almost desperately, as if music could drown out the tension curling through the air. When the toast began, Sophia drifted close. Her perfume, jasmine and something sharper, coiled around me. She leaned in, her voice a saccharine drawl. "Congratulations, Clara," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Though I do wonder, did you forget my gift? You know, the apartment? You promised, didn't you?" My stomach plummeted. She was smiling, lips painted the color of blood, her eyes daring me to contradict her. Around us, people laughed nervously, unsure if it was a joke. I glanced toward my parents, hoping they would scold her for humiliating me. Instead, my father raised his glass. "Your sister has always been generous," he announced proudly. "I'm sure she'll take care of you, Sophia. It's what older sisters do." Laughter, clinking glasses, nods of approval. I felt my face burn as if I were trapped under a spotlight meant to expose me, not celebrate me. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I wanted to scream, to deny it, to tell them all that I owed my sister nothing, but my throat closed around the words. The night was supposed to be mine, and I refused to let her turn it into a spectacle. I forced a smile, tasting iron at the back of my throat. "Enjoy the night, Sophia," I whispered, barely audible over the orchestra's swell. She tilted her head, smirk tugging at her lips. The reception blurred into a haze of dancing lights and artificial laughter. Every step I took, I felt her eyes on me, her presence looming like a shadow I could never escape. She drifted through the crowd like a ghost in a borrowed gown, soaking in attention that should have been mine. And every time my parents passed by, they whispered reminders that still cut like knives. "Don't be selfish." "She's still young, Clara." "You've always been strong. She needs you more than you need her." Each phrase was a chain, binding me tighter to the role I had been forced into since childhood, the caretaker, the provider, the silent wall holding the family together. As the night deepened, I found myself standing alone beside the towering cake. 4 tiers of delicate sugar flowers, white frosting shimmering like snow. It was meant to be the centerpiece, the symbol of everything perfect. Guests gathered, phones raised, cameras flashing. For one brief second, I allowed myself to imagine it. This moment captured forever, unmarred, beautiful. Then Sophia darted across the dance floor, laughing too loudly, a glass of champagne sloshing in her hand. She brushed past the cake table. The structure wobbled just slightly, but enough to make my heart lurch. Gasps rippled. I froze, breath caught in my chest. Her fingers curled around the edge of the table as if steadying herself, though her eyes flicked toward me with something almost deliberate. The cake swayed before righting itself, leaving a collective exhale of relief among the guests. But I saw her smirk. I saw the flash in her eyes that promised this wasn't over. Later, as the music softened and guests drifted back to their seats, she found me in the corner. Her lips nearly touched my ear, her whisper sharp as broken glass. "If you don't give me the apartment, Clara, I'll make sure you regret it. Consider this your warning." My chest tightened, rage and disbelief colliding inside me. I turned to face her, but she was already gone, swallowed by the crowd of glittering gowns and tailored suits. The champagne flute trembled in my hand, threatening to spill. It was my wedding day, my golden cage. And for the first time, I realized the bars weren't made of gold at all, but of obligations, betrayals, and a lifetime of silence I had mistaken for love. The night was far from over. The reception had reached its height. Glasses clinked, the orchestra swelled, and I almost convinced myself the earlier whisper from Sophia was a bluff meant to rattle me. Then she drifted into view, her champagne glass half empty, her laugh too sharp, too loud. My stomach tightened as she wove between guests, swaying just enough to appear careless. I should have seen it coming. She veered toward the cake table again, her heels clicking against the polished marble. Time seemed to slow. She brushed against the linen, teetered dramatically, then threw her arm outward as if to catch her balance. The towering cake shuddered under her touch. A gasp spread through the hall. Then, with horrifying grace, it collapsed. 4 tiers toppled into ruin, frosting smearing across the floor like spilled snow. The silence was deafening. I stood frozen, my mouth parted but empty of sound. Cameras stopped flashing. The string quartet faltered mid-note. My dream centerpiece lay in shambles, destroyed in front of every guest, in front of my husband. Sophia covered her mouth with her free hand, her eyes widening in mock horror. "Oops," she said, almost laughing. The word rang in my ears like a slap. Before I could speak, before Daniel could even move, my mother rushed forward, her voice a soothing balm meant for the crowd rather than me. "You know how she gets," she said quickly, her arm wrapping protectively around Sophia's shoulders. "She's just clumsy. Poor thing. Poor thing." The fury rose hot in my chest, but I swallowed it down. Around us, guests shifted awkwardly, whispering, avoiding my eyes. My father clapped his hands together. "Let's not ruin the evening. These things happen." No, these things didn't just happen. They were orchestrated. I could feel it in the curl of Sophia's smirk as she hit her face against Mother's shoulder. I excused myself, fleeing toward the powder room. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror. Lipstick smudged, mascara threatening to run. "Don't cry," I whispered to myself. "Not here. Not now." But the truth pulsed in my chest like poison spreading through veins. My family would rather humiliate me publicly than ever hold her accountable. When I returned to the ballroom, the cake had already been whisked away, as though erasing the evidence could erase the wound. Laughter had returned, forced and brittle, guests pretending nothing had happened. Yet, in the corner of my eye, I noticed something strange. A man in a dark suit lowering his phone, tucking it into his pocket with a subtle glance in my direction. A chill ran through me. Had he recorded it? The thought lodged itself in my mind like a spark, but I was pulled away before I could process it. Daniel found me, concern etched across his face. "Clara, we'll order another cake. Don't let her ruin this for you." I wanted to believe him. But how do you salvage a day when the sabotage comes from within your own blood? Hours later, long after the last dance and the forced smiles, I sat in our hotel room still dressed in white, numb beneath the weight of it all. The silence was heavier than any music. Daniel tried to comfort me, but my thoughts spiraled back to Sophia's voice, her smirk, the calculated malice behind that "oops." The next morning, the truth deepened. I had barely opened my laptop when a new email blinked into my inbox. The subject line read, "Family Duty." My stomach clenched. It was from my mother. I clicked. Attached was a contract, an official transfer of property papers, my name neatly typed where the signature should be. The condo. My condo. The apartment I had worked years to afford. The message beneath was short, almost casual. "This is your duty as the eldest. Sign and return immediately. Sophia deserves her start in life. We raised you to be strong for her. Don't fail us now." The words bled into me like acid. Not a request, not a suggestion, an order, a declaration that my role was not bride, not daughter, not even woman, but provider, sacrificer, scapegoat. I stared at the screen, the hum of the hotel air conditioner suddenly unbearable. My chest tightened. The cake, the humiliation, the whispers, it had all been part of something larger, a carefully nurtured belief that I existed for her benefit, for theirs. I was not a sister. I was a vessel. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. The weight of the truth pressed down so heavily I struggled to breathe. And yet, under the crushing despair, a sliver of clarity pierced through. This wasn't clumsiness. This wasn't immaturity. It was design. I was the sacrifice they had chosen long ago. The morning after the email, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at my laptop as though the words might rearrange themselves into something sane. Daniel came out of the bathroom, tie loose, his hair still damp. His voice was careful, too careful. "Clara," he began, "your parents called me." My stomach twisted. "They called you? Why?" He hesitated. They just want what's best for everyone. They said the condo isn't really about money. It's about family unity. They think if you give it to Sophia, it'll bring peace." The words sliced through me. My hands curled into fists. "Peace?" My voice cracked, louder than I intended. "You think this is about peace? It's about control. It's about them deciding I'm nothing more than a wallet." Daniel reached for me, his brows knitting together. "I'm not saying you should do it, Clara. I'm just saying maybe we should consider—" "Consider!" I snapped, standing so fast the bedspread shifted under my feet. "This is our life, Daniel. Our marriage. Not a contract for them to negotiate." My chest heaved. "Don't you see? They'll never stop. If I give her this, next it will be something else. And then something else. It won't end." The silence stretched, taut as wire. He finally placed his hands on mine, steady, grounding. "You're right," he said softly. But even as his words soothed, I saw something flicker in his eyes, a shadow, a hesitation he didn't want me to notice. It was enough to shake me. The one person I thought I could trust, the one who promised me forever, had listened to their poison long enough to consider it. I pulled away, retreating toward the window. "This marriage is mine," I whispered, voice trembling. "Not theirs." For the first time in my life, I raised my voice against the invisible chains that had bound me since childhood. "This is my marriage, not a family bargain." The words echoed through the hotel room, reverberating in my chest. I didn't know whether I was declaring it to Daniel, to my parents, or to myself. He nodded, silent, but the unease in his eyes lingered, like a secret I hadn't been told. The following days blurred into shadows. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. The world outside our apartment pressed forward, but I stayed inside, blinds drawn, drifting in and out of silence. Daniel went to work, came home with takeout, tried to coax me into conversation. I responded with fragments, if at all. Nights were the worst. I dreamed of the wedding again and again, but each time it shifted. In my dreams, I stood frozen in lace, but when I turned toward the altar, it wasn't me walking down the aisle, it was Sophia. She wore my dress. She held Daniel's arm, and everyone applauded. My parents beamed. Even Daniel smiled. I woke, gasping, drenched in sweat, the sheets tangled around me like ropes. The days stretched on. My body felt heavy, my spirit hollow. I ignored calls, ignored emails. Daniel tried to reach me through the fog. One evening, he sat beside me on the couch, his hand hesitant on my back. "Clara, please," he whispered. "Talk to me." The dam finally broke. I collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. Every wound spilled out. The years of being dismissed, the endless sacrifices, the humiliation of the wedding, the weight of being nothing more than the responsible one. He held me, murmuring words I barely heard, his arms anchoring me to something real. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to be small, fragile, breakable. "I can't keep living like this," I choked. "I can't keep being their sacrifice." His embrace tightened. "Then don't. You don't owe them anything." It should have been a balm, and maybe it was in that fleeting moment. My tears slowed, exhaustion pulling me toward a restless sleep. For once, I let myself rest in his arms, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my cheek. But peace never lasted long in my family. The next morning, as the gray light of dawn filtered through the blinds, my phone buzzed. I blinked through swollen eyes, reaching for it. An unknown number lit up the screen. One message, one attachment. My thumb hesitated before tapping. The video opened. There was Sophia, champagne in hand, her movements far too deliberate. I watched as she glanced toward the crowd, smirked, then placed her hand against the cake table. The push was subtle, practiced. The cake trembled before crashing to the floor. And then, that smile. That calculated smile. My chest constricted. Proof. Someone had seen. Someone had recorded. And now they had sent it to me. The poison hadn't just spread. It had left a trail. The video looped again and again on my phone, each replay slamming the truth deeper into my chest. It wasn't clumsiness. It wasn't an accident. Sophia had done it deliberately, her smirk betraying everything I had suspected. At last, I had proof. For the first time in my life, the doubt that had gnawed at me, the endless gaslighting, the whispers that I was imagining things, began to crumble. The fury inside me did not break me this time. It steadied me. I searched late into the night, laptop glowing against the dark. I devoured articles about family favoritism, psychological studies about scapegoats and golden children. I typed keywords I'd never dared to voice. Narcissistic family roles, eldest daughter sacrifice, golden child, scapegoat. Each sentence I read felt like a knife sliding out of my back. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't imagining it. Others had lived it too. In forums and support groups, I found strangers describing my life in uncanny detail. The golden child who could do no wrong, the scapegoat forced to carry the weight, the cycle of manipulation, the gaslighting, the subtle destruction of self-worth. Reading their words was like inhaling air after drowning for years. I joined one of the groups. For the first time, I told my story to people who believed me instantly. Their replies were gentle, fierce, validating. "You are not alone. You are not imagining it. You deserve freedom." My anger sharpened into resolve. If my family had cast me as the eternal sacrifice, then I would rewrite the script. Then another message arrived. The unknown number sent me a second text. This time, not a video, but words. "You don't know me, but I know what they did to you. Meet me." At first, I froze, fear prickling along my skin. Who would involve themselves in this mess? Then, the name signed beneath. Anna. My breath caught. Aunt Anna, my mother's sister. The woman no one in my family spoke about except in hushed, disparaging tones. I remembered fragments of childhood warnings. She turned against us. She doesn't understand family loyalty. She had been painted as the traitor, the one who had chosen exile. And now she had given me the proof. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. She looked older than I remembered, her hair streaked with silver, but her eyes sharp and kind. When she saw me, she smiled a sad smile as though she recognized the battle scars written across my face. "I knew they'd do this to you," she said softly, sliding her phone across the table. "I recorded the cake. I've been waiting for the right moment to show you. You needed to see for yourself." My hands trembled as I touched the phone. "Why? Why help me?" "Because once I was you," she replied. "They tried to make me the scapegoat too. When I refused, they erased me from the family. But I've lived freer outside their cage than I ever did within it. You don't have to stay, Clara." Tears burned my eyes. Her words weren't just comfort. They were a map out of the labyrinth. That night, I returned home different. The fear had loosened its grip. I began combing through my old files, searching for receipts, contracts, evidence of every sacrifice I had made. Bank statements showing rent transfers, emails of me co-signing loans, messages from my mother, guilt-tripping me into giving more. Every artifact was a brick in the case I was building. Daniel noticed the change. He didn't question it. He simply joined. When I explained Aunt Anna's involvement, he surprised me by saying, "Then let's do this together." For the first time, I felt him firmly on my side, not swayed by my parents' words. We spent hours sorting through folders, printing screenshots, creating timelines. Each piece of evidence strengthened the truth. I had been used, manipulated, sacrificed at every turn. My rage no longer drowned me. It propelled me forward. One evening, as the pile of evidence grew high on the table, Daniel looked at me, pride flickering in his eyes. "You've carried this for too long. It's time they face it." I nodded. My hands no longer shook. The final step was simple but terrifying. I drafted an email. Attached were every file, every receipt, every video. I wrote the words carefully, my heart pounding with each keystroke. To our family. For years, I stayed silent. For years, I was told I was selfish for wanting a life of my own. Here is the truth. On Sunday, I will bring everything forward. Attend or continue in ignorance. It makes no difference. The story will be told. With a deep breath, I clicked send. The message left my screen, but not my mind. A war had begun. The dining hall buzzed with anticipation, a low hum of voices filling the air as relatives gathered around the long mahogany table. The air smelled of roasted meats and polished wood, but beneath it all lingered the acrid scent of tension. I stood at the head of the room, my laptop connected to the projector, the folder of evidence open like a weapon ready to be unleashed. Sophia sauntered in late, her heels clicking defiantly across the floor, her white dress shimmering as though she wanted to mimic the night of my wedding again. My parents flanked her like guards, mother's chin lifted in pride, father's gaze sharp as steel. They expected me to fold, to crumble as I always had. But not this time. When the room settled, I clicked play. The video projected onto the wall, the screen flickering for a moment before freezing on the image of Sophia, her hand pressed against the cake table, her smirk flashing before the collapse. Gasps echoed. The silence that followed was suffocating. The cake crashed again and again in the replay, each loop a blow against the narrative my parents had spun for decades. The room filled with whispers, soft at first, then growing louder. Aunts leaned into uncles, cousins shifted uncomfortably. "That wasn't an accident." She pushed it. "Why would she—" I stood still, hands clasped before me, my pulse steady. My mother shot to her feet, her voice sharp. "This proves nothing. Clara is twisting things, manipulating you all. Sophia is innocent." I met her gaze calmly. "I have been silent long enough. My voice carried through the room, firm and unwavering. For years, you made me believe I was selfish, ungrateful, cruel, but the truth is here, and everyone can see it. Father slammed his fist against the table. Stop this performance, Clara. You're tearing this family apart. I shook my head. No, you tore it apart when you decided only one daughter mattered. The murmurs swelled. For the first time, the cracks in their facade were visible to everyone. Sophia shifted in her chair, her face paling under the weight of so many eyes. Suddenly, she buried her face in her hands and began to sob. But it wasn't remorse. It was panic. Through her sobs, words spilled out, tumbling over each other. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just needed money. I thought if Clara gave me the condo, it would cover it. I had no choice. The room hushed again, hanging on her confession. My chest tightened as I stepped closer. What money, Sophia? Her mascara streaked down her cheeks. The loans, she whispered. The ones in your name. I signed them. I had to. I thought I'd pay them back before you found out. A collective gasp erupted. My knees nearly buckled. My name, my credit, my identity. My mother blanched, shaking her head. Sophia, no, tell me you didn't. I did, Sophia wailed. I forged her signature. I used her information. I didn't think it would spiral like this. The words hung heavy in the air. My parents' faces drained of color, the weight of complicity pressing down on them. They hadn't protected her. They had enabled her, blinded by favoritism so deep it had birthed a monster. One of my uncles leaned forward. Forgery is a crime. Do you realize what this means? Sophia sobbed harder, collapsing against Mother, who no longer had words to shield her. Father sat back, stunned, his authority shattered. The carefully constructed system of favoritism, the golden child and the scapegoat, crumbled in real time before the entire family. I should have felt rage, but what I felt was release. For years I had carried their cruelty in silence, doubting myself, twisting into someone smaller just to survive. Now, their lies lay bare, undeniable. Daniel placed a steady hand on my shoulder. I didn't need him to speak. I could see the pride in his eyes, the affirmation I had always craved but never received from my own blood. I turned back to the family. My voice wavered, but not with fear, with clarity. I didn't have to destroy them. They destroyed themselves. I only brought the truth to light. The room sat in stunned silence, relatives exchanging looks of disbelief and pity. My parents clung to Sophia, but their authority was gone, their image shattered beyond repair. Tears stung my eyes, but they were not of sorrow. They were the tears of a woman finally unshackled. I allowed a small smile to break through, even as wetness streamed down my cheeks. Justice doesn't always need my hand, I whispered, loud enough for the nearest to hear. Sometimes it arrives on its own. And in that moment, I realized, perhaps for the first time in my life, I was free. The fallout was swift. Within days of the family gathering, word spread like wildfire through the extended Mitchell clan. Relatives who had once fawned over Sophia now whispered in disapproval, shaking their heads at the revelations. The golden child's shine had dulled, tarnished under the weight of lies and forgery. Sophia's debts unraveled in public view. Creditors called, letters piled at my parents' doorstep, and her once carefully curated image of effortless charm shattered. I heard through cousins that she was drowning, eviction notices, unpaid bills, a reputation in tatters. The very pedestal my parents had built for her now crumbled beneath her weight, and no one reached out to save her. As for my parents, their authority fractured. Relatives no longer deferred to their judgments or upheld their excuses. Their voices, once sharp and commanding, were now spoken of in past tense as cautionary tales. They had protected Sophia at the expense of truth, and now, in the light of exposure, they were left with nothing but silence. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't gloat. Watching them unravel wasn't the sweet victory I had once imagined. It was bittersweet. Liberating, yes, but tinged with grief for the family I had always wished to have but never did. One evening, I walked alone to the condo that had become the center of the storm. My footsteps echoed in the quiet hallway, my key cold in my hand. Standing before the door, I hesitated. This place symbolized so much: sacrifice, betrayal, but also independence. It was the battleground where my family demanded my submission, and the fortress I had fought to reclaim. I slid the key into the lock, pausing before turning it. A question pulsed in my chest. Could I forgive? Not them, perhaps. Not yet. Not fully. But could I forgive myself for the years I had stayed silent? For the times I let their cruelty define me? I exhaled, a shaky release, and stepped inside. The condo was quiet, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floor. Boxes still lingered from the move, but I saw not chaos, only possibility. This was mine, not because it was a gift, not because it was demanded, but because I had earned it. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild. I started a small blog, tentatively at first, sharing my story under a pseudonym. I wrote about the golden child and the scapegoat, about favoritism, about betrayal disguised as love. And to my astonishment, the responses poured in. Strangers from across the world recognized themselves in my words. They thanked me for putting their pain into sentences they couldn't find themselves. What began as therapy became purpose. I wasn't alone, and neither were they. Each story they shared strengthened me, stitched me back together. My scars became something else, maps, guiding others through the labyrinth I had once believed was mine alone. Life slowed into something gentler. Mornings with coffee on the balcony, evenings spent writing, weekends planting flowers in the small garden patch outside my building. I pressed soil around delicate green stems, watching them root, imagining myself doing the same. As the petals unfolded under the sunlight, so too did I. Daniel joined me often, his presence steady. He no longer carried the hesitation I once saw in his eyes. Instead, he looked at me as though witnessing a rebirth, and in some ways, that's what it was. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Yet closure is never neat. One late afternoon, as golden light stretched across the hallway outside my door, a knock echoed, steady, hesitant. I opened it slowly, my breath caught in my throat. There she was, Sophia. Her once perfect hair hung limp, her eyes swollen from tears or sleepless nights. Gone was the smug smile, the careless charm. What remained was desperation, raw and unpolished. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her gaze begged for something: mercy, forgiveness, salvation. I stood there, the silence thick between us. Behind me, the condo glowed in warm light, filled with the beginnings of a life that was truly mine. Before me, the ghost of my past trembled on the threshold. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. For once, the choice was mine. The screen of my mind faded to black, leaving only the sound of her ragged breath, the unanswered question lingering in the space between us.